This is a picture of Native Americans. Now, this isn't what we think of Native Americans today. Native Americans are our brother and sister on the street. They are so Americanized that we sometimes tend to forget that Indians came from tribes. So, in this lecture, I'm going to be going over who were the Native Americans before 1492 and what were their origins. Now, first off, I'd like to start by saying that I don't think the Native American origins are of their people. I think the Native Americans are more attuned to nature. So when I like to think of the beginning of Native Americans, I like to think of nature. Native Americans, nature, N-A-T, same letters, right? So first of all, I'd like to talk about this place. It looks like Tatooine from Star Wars, but it's not. It's Chaco. So Chaco was an ancient trading hub. Lots of roads came from different directions and lots of people gathered here, all from different places. They all just ended up here. And so Chaco had a lot of different materials and trading stuff, and a bunch of merchants came here. And you may be thinking, well, Chaco, it sounds like chocolate. And you'd be right, because so many people came here that the materials were then gathered to form chocolate. But Chaco wasn't only popular for its chocolate. Chaco also had a lot of astrological achievements. Chaco was originated in the first century around 900 AD, but only seemed to become popular in 1966. I find it funny how something like this could remain hidden from us until it became a national park. So next up, we have Cahokia. Now, Cahokia was special because it was aligned to the stars. Well, almost. It was actually 5 degrees off the north and south axis. So it was in between the middle of the sun and the moon. That's what really made Cahokia a cool place. Cahokia was in the perfect sweet spot between the sun and the moon, so it could be attuned to the stars. You may see this mound right here, and the reason they built this up is because the Native Americans worshiped their chiefs, and they wanted the higher ups in their clan, the chiefs, to have a way to look at the sun, and they wanted their chiefs to be able to look up into the sky and into the heavens. So that's why it's built up like this. The mound also represents the spirituality of the Native Americans. They were a very spiritual people, and they believed in the shaman or spirits. So Cahokia was built up by maize farming, corn farming, and was sadly killed off by climate change and other modern day issues. So what happened to the Native Americans after 1492? Well, one might ask, were the Indians slaves? So Christopher Columbus and other English colonizers kept Indians as trophies and kidnapped them. Columbus kidnapped Indians and kept them captive. He believed they would make good servants. Now, why were they slaves? Now, so what I initially thought was that, okay, they're slaves because the Americans wanted to take them back with them so they could show them off and maybe learn their culture. They're slaves so they can, so that I thought that the Americans would want to study the Indians. But what really happened is the Americans just wanted to use the Indians for farming and to fight in their wars. The Americans didn't take them as slaves so they could learn from them. The Americans took them as slaves to profit, which was very American of them. So, friend or foe, here we have a picture of Thomas Jefferson. Now, Thomas Jefferson wanted to civilize the Indians. Now, what do I mean by that? Jefferson didn't want the Indians to be savages. He wanted them to be farmers, and he wanted them to dress fancy and join them as Americans. Now, I feel like this could have worked, but the way Jefferson said it was Jefferson really wanted to get rid of Indian culture, and he wanted to basically remake the Indians from scratch into a more American image. He had a plan in his head of what he wanted to do with the Indians, and he wrote it down in private letters and sent him off. And he either wanted to claim he either wanted to befriend the Indians and civilize them, or he wanted to claim their land. And so he had a plan to claim their land and wrote it down in private letters because the Indians didn't want to civilize themselves. But it turns out it never came to fruition, and Jefferson never did claim any of the Indian land. It was all just in his head, which he wrote down. So nothing happened over that, but it was a cool thought Jefferson had. Here is Sitting Bull, a very famous, popular Indian. Now, Sitting Bull united many Indian tribes to fight against the white man, and they actually won. They were victorious against General Custer. But sadly, one day, Sitting Bull was shot by another Indian police officer, and this started a conflict between the Americans and the Indians. It actually made the conflict worse. And eventually, Sitting Bull's followers went to go follow another person by the name of Chief Bigfoot. Now, Chief Bigfoot wanted peace. So he made the white flag, and he took himself and his white flag and he went down to White Knee Keep, right? And White Knee Keep was a Indian sanctuary, right? A lot of Indian people are there. And the Americans did not know that Chief Bigfoot wanted peace. So the Americans started an ambush. 250 Lakota Indians died, many including women and children. The Lakota Indians have never forgotten this, and it was a sad day. Sitting Bull and Chief Bigfoot only wanted peace. So, how did the Indians adapt to the start of American civilization? And I want to stress this, this isn't just part of the Indian story, but this part is a part of American civilization. Around the time 1887, America was becoming a more industrial era. It could be deemed as the end of the Wild West. It is also called the Second Industrial Revolution. So in 1887 was only 1 year after one of the first automobiles was made here. This was the era of railroads and telegraphs. More iron was being used to build the railroads, and more scientific inventions were happening. A lot of technological advances. So yes, this is part of the story for the Indians, but I feel like it is also a big story for America, and the Indians played a role in it. So this is the Dawes Act right here. And what the Dawes Act did was it allowed individual Indians to own land. The key word there being individual Indians, because Indians were always part of a tribe. They had a clan, they had a group of people, but the Americans only wanted a single Indian to own land so they could get rid of and eliminate the Indian tribes. The Indians didn't really like this, so they didn't buy into the Dawes Act, and the Dawes Act failed because it actually made white people take over the Indian land instead of actually giving land to the Indians. So this is the Americans, really trying to make peace, but they're still failing because they're being a bit greedy about it. So finally, we come to more adapting to civilization, the Indian boarding schools. The Indian boarding schools were an attempt by the Americans to really civilize the Indians. Uh, the rich Americans and rather elitist wanted to whitewash the Indians by educating them. They thought if they could educate the savages, that they would become civilized. So they put them in a school. Now, they mistreated the Indians here. The Indians were in a tough place. It was a lose-lose situation for them. On one hand, they could keep speaking their language in the school and remain loyal to their family and tribe, but they might get beat up by the English people, or they could learn to speak English and go with what the white man's telling them to do, but they would be going against their family and they might lose their heritage. So do they want to get beat up, or do they want to risk losing their heritage and their Indianness, their tribe? It's a very hard problem for them. So I know I talked a lot negative here, but how did it all end? We've talked a lot about how the Indians grew and they've gotten stolen and they were in wars. Well, in the end, it's kind of interesting how it ended. In the end, they became civilized. I had some photos of famous Indians here because They're famous people in American society. And it is what Jefferson wanted in a way. So you could say that this might have been a negative outcome, that the Indians didn't keep their tribe and they didn't keep their Indian culture. But I think of this as a positive outcome because now we look at them and as brothers and sisters in American society. So that is how the Indians have evolved over the centuries. And here are my sources. Thank you for listening.